G'day guys. Just a quick little video just to bring people up to date what's happening in the vaccine world of COVID-19, so to speak, just so people have got a bit of an idea of what's in the pipeline, options, both now and in the future. So I know I've talked a lot about Novavax and stuff like that, and as a protein subunit type. Usually these are the ones that don't have any of this replicating type technology. They're not DNA based, they're not mRNA based, they're not basically viral vector based, which just use different approaches, but in the end require to get some material into your cells to basically use the replication machinery of your cells. And as I've alluded and explained in other videos about the issues and the risks associated with that, extrapolating from oncology primarily. But I thought about just having a bit of an overview, seeing what's available out there, what's in the pipeline in terms of these vaccines. Actually, somebody put a comment in, and I actually provided her with some information about the South Australian one. But I thought, yeah, why not give you guys a bit of insight. Maybe you want to know about other things that are in the pipeline or what's available around the world. So rather than keeping that information to myself and making multiple little videos and all that, I might as well just basically give you guys a bit of a heads up what's in the pipeline and what's really happening out there. So let me just share my screen in that regard. Okay. Vaccines. Candidates in clinical trials. There's 153 candidates. There's 473 vaccine trials, and they are happening in 61 countries with vaccine trials. So currently 37 are in phase 1, 53 are in phase 2, 49 are basically in phase 3. 8 vaccines no longer progressing, so basically they've stopped. We know one of them is that Queensland one where they were using HIV. Bad choice as an option, as a viral vector. Not a good idea. So I do feel for you if you're in that experimental group. Then there's also vaccines that have been approved, 23. So what are they? Bit of an overview. Okay. There's basically, let's go to that for a sec, is the vaccine rates. So around the world, so if we're going to look at those, these are vaccines approval, authorization, different countries. Where clinical trials were conducted. And these are all the related stuff, the agencies that were involved in the countries that they happen, where they were approved, which ones and all that. So if people, people can check their own countries, people can check what's happening in their part of the world, what trials were conducted in their part of the world. So if you want a bit of an insight in all that sort of stuff, you're really interested for your own personal reasons, or maybe for your family, or maybe somebody was involved and want to know more about what they were involved in. So whatever your reason is at. Now, 49 vaccines in phase 3 trials. So these are the ones that are close to in that regard. There's a lot of, a lot in the pipeline. You'd be shocked how many there are. So these are protein subunits. So protein subunits are like Novavax. You can see here's Novavax. 9 trials in 7 countries. This one is a subunit like Novavax in Cuba. That's another one in Cuba. They've got a few. Surprising. So these are different ones. Covavax, the Indian one as well. So these are a whole lot of Western China hospital. You got a hospital basically is developing one. Well, there you go. So all those, and all you do is just click on that and they'll tell you what type it is. Protein subunit, virus-like particle, DNA. These are a type of component, viral vaccines. These are whole type. So when you get inactivated, that's the whole virus, but inactivated. The live attenuated contains copies of the virus that have been weakened. So there are, it's like a weakened version of COVID to sensitize the immune system. So it actually behaves like COVID. I would give these a miss because they do go into the cells. So you don't want this live attenuated one. So give that a miss, deactivate it, that's fine. It'll stay in the localized site, not a problem. Replicating viral vector and non-replicating viral vector. So that basically means that it's bring the viral type, whatever it is the transport equipment, bringing it in, but it still gets into cells and stuff like that. Now, it can't replicate, but it's still, unknown commodity in terms of potential risks. We have no idea because we haven't used these either. These ones have been used in oncology, replicating ones, and we know the side effects of those, DNA-based and RNA-based, your Pfizers and stuff like that, especially the RNA-based problematics. So I'd give all those a miss. Virus-like particles contains virus proteins that mimic the structure of the virus, but not genetic material. So basically that's very similar to the protein subunit. So this is basically, here you've got an activated virus, here you've got an activated virus. These virus-like particles is just the particles which you get injected at a localized level. The difference is with the subunit ones, they've got the protein spike. That's the difference between. Here you've got the entire virus coating the outside, the spikes, all that sort of stuff, excluding the material inside. So could it potentially get into a cell if it gets into the bloodstream? Yeah, potentially, but would it cause any real problem? Some reactivity potentially, but it's way safer than all these other ones. Okay, so that's the key thing. Now coming back to this, so that one's there. These are DNA ones. Stay away from those. RNA ones like Moderna and Pfizer. Stay away from those. Give those a miss. Non-replicating viral vector like Johnson & Johnson. Yes, we know. AstraZeneca. Sputnik. Oh. So these are the inactivated. So that's whole inactivated viruses, like those ones we talked about before, like the Sinovax. That's the one in Turkey. A couple of others. But these are more traditional ones. So anything which is an inactivated one is very traditional in that regard. Protein subunits is basically you breed it into like moths, which is basically or something else. You could be breeding it into eggs or whatever, you know. There's going to be different organisms that they may, and then they basically purify it, separate the spikes, then basically add it after they've done the purification, then add the adjunct in, put it into a preparation, which they inject in the local site. So you only get part of the, which is the spike, the key component. And then activated or semi or partially activated, which I prefer not. But the inactivated is basically the whole thing, but deactivated, which is very much stock standard traditional. That's how the flu vax is. That's how all of them. It's the whole, but deactivated, inactivated. Sorry, I should use the right terminology. But when it comes to the protein subunits, it's the same concept, but you're only using part of it, not all of it. So this is an Novavax formulation. So there are a lot of different corporations around the world that are basically using the existing stuff or basing it, like they get a license and they've spun off their own. So that's what all these things are in that regard. And all you have to do is, like, let's say we were going to look at this one here, Novavax ICC vaccine, and we're going to take a look at a bit that and see, get more details about it. So it's in phase 2 in Australia. So it must be probably an Australian company that's actually, so I can actually search for this by Googling. Okay, so ICC education. Okay. Illinois Central College. Okay. So some college that's actually developing in the US. So you got to look it up and find out which company it is and stuff like that. Which country, which organisation. There's a whole lot of myriad, as you can see, in that regard. So there's a whole lot of these ones again, which is a part of the viral particle. They're probably fine as well. They're a bit like the protein subunit. The only difference is they don't have any of the material inside. They've just got the outer, so it's like a shell, empty shell type thing. So VLP. And these are all in phase 2, and these are in the phase 1 clinical trials, all these ones here of different sorts. And these are ones that are no longer in progress. That are basically, there's the Queensland one that they were using HIV. Fuck. Somebody wasn't using their brain in that regard. So that's the Australian one. So they did trials they did phase 1 trial in Australia, phase 2 and 3 in basically Iran. So it's an Australian-based company, as you can see, in South Australia. So Vaccine Proprietary Limited, Department of Endocrinology, Flinders Medical Centre out there. So it's a university-based one that, they're like the other one that I was looking at before. There are university ones and institutional ones that do exist. And then some countries will basically license that. So basically, this is the licensing version, Spikogen, and pretty much vaccines as a result of a collaboration between Vaccine, which is the Australian company that pretty much did the R&D development, and Sinogen, a private company with operations in the Middle East. So, and the Iranian Food and Drug Administration has issued an emergency use authorization for Spikogen vaccine. So they've approved it. Here's the document. People want to look at it that are in that region, and that's their information. There's a bit of a video here. One of their marketing videos. High beat music, but really it's all happening. Oh yes, and there's the logo. And so these are the results within 2 months. If people want to go through the results of this. It'll be interesting to see whether it becomes available in Australia or not. So what was the amount? People want to look at that. And that's all the trial. You can look at it, look it up and look at all the trial information. That's why you can go in there and just actually look at the trial. There's the documents and all that sort of stuff. So how many were enrolled, stuff like that. So that load up. Yep, it did load up. So it gives you a bit of information. Title. Both genders between 18 and 50. I'm just using this as an example because it's Australian developed. Unfortunately, it is unfortunate that the Australian government isn't supporting some of these local developments, and they're supporting a lot of the internationals in that regard. So it is unfortunate. There's CSL here. They've got a lot of facilities they could have developed, produced it for Australia. Would have saved a lot of dosh that we have to send overseas to buy this stuff. We could have produced it here, a lot of the stuff for ourselves. So there's a lot of that sort of stuff. That's the politics, as I've talked before, which is annoying in some different respects. But yeah, that's a bit of an overview what's happening in the vaccine world of COVID-19. So people want to investigate their own country, their own region to see what's happening, what trials are happening, who's involved, participants, what were the results, and different options. There are people that are overseas or have family overseas, and so they may want to contact them and say, well, do you realise this is available and have been approved in that country, and you can sort out your issues or whatever, and it's much safer type option. So there's all that information. So I hope that was useful for you guys. At the end of the day, my sort of attitude is that we should have gone down the path of vitamin D and should have resolved and nipped it in the bud with vitamin D throughout the population. Unfortunately, governments have pursued a different policy agenda. They've forced people into unacceptable options, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to viral vector DNA and mRNA, variants. But at the end of the day, we can scream and shout and do whatever we like, but it won't change the fact. The fact is that people need options. People have families. They need to travel. They've got family situations which don't allow them to basically, dump their job. They've got mortgages, they're in difficult financial circumstances, and they can't afford to basically make waves. They're in a compromised position. Some people that are not in those, they can stick to their vitamin D, but other people don't have that luxury. So that's for them, to give them some information and give them options, safe options, relatively safe options. Obviously, they haven't gone through, nothing's gone through 5 to 7 years of trials, but traditional vaccines, generally speaking, are going to be a hell of a lot safer. Even past vaccines, when it came to the flu vax or things of that sort, respiratory type, we've never really had any major issues. Now, with non-respiratory, non-corona types, we've had a few issues, and they got resolved. But with respiratory type, like the flu vaccines and stuff like that, no, we haven't. So coronaviruses are a bit different. And so also their sort of preparation is a bit different. They use the ACE2 receptor. They infect the lungs. They don't generally cause massive illness throughout the body in different parts, like you may get with something like polio or whatever. They will operate differently. So the respiratory. And so the whole purpose is, even, and this is important, even if you're basically required to take something like this, even the safe ones, always basically maintain a good vitamin D status. That excessive pain you get here and some of the symptoms is the overreaction of the immune system. Doesn't last very long. It's usually 1 or 2 days, unlike the other stuff that can last for weeks upon end or months, and potentially has up to 2-year risks associated. And that is from extrapolating from past. Now, this video is not meant to be, in any way medical advice to anyone. This video, the purpose of this information, and only information for information purposes, to at least provide insights on what's happening in the vaccine world, what options exist for those who need this option. For those who don't, then this video is probably irrelevant, stick to vitamin D. But for those who do need those sort of options, that require basically these mandated, unacceptably mandated violations of human rights, vaccine passports, in my opinion, my personal opinion, this video is meant for them to provide them options. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. and got some insights. And if you find something in terms of that's in phase 3, has already gone through phase 3, it's less problematic, and it's in your country, call your pollies. Get your allies to call your pollies. Get your friends to call your pollies. Put some pressure on them to get some safer stuff out there rather than the stuff that we've been dished up until now. Anyway, see yous.